Here's a close-up of what this stuff looks like, front and back, inside. You notice it's of differing thicknesses, so you want to put your screws in there for maximum holdability. In some cases the existing wood is fine, but the nail just isn't doing its job holding the board down and sticking up just enough that a hammer will not get in there. In that case, we can use what's called a cat's paw that can dig in a little deeper, like so. And pull them out. And if for some reason the end of the head breaks off or the nail breaks off, like right there, you can take your vice grips, lock them on there, and just roll them on the side of the vice grip like this to pull the nail out. I found a lot of bouncy boards. When you step on them, they kind of spring back and forth. And the original decking used nails, and you can see they're rusted. They're not, these are all the same length nail as far as I can tell. Some of them just have rusted in half. So where the nails would pull out easily or sticking proud, I would replace them with these screws that we're going to use on the composite deck, and make sure it's nice and solid before we put on the composite deck. Now let's talk a minute about these composite deck screws. Unique screw design reduces composite fiber mushrooming. Don't want that to happen. No pre-drilling required. Color matched for brown. It's almost kind of sort of close to the brown I'm using. Recommended for treated lumber. Limited lifetime warranty against rust and corrosion. And free bit included. No strip star drive. Trap head cuts wood fibers and seals hole. Wow. Reverse threads grind material and pull into hole. Fast start self-drill point prevents splitting. Well, there's something to be said for that. You notice the design on the tip of the screw has a cutaway, so it actually acts like a drill bit, making its own pilot hole. And then it comes down here, and the threads are backwards right there. So they usually, when you drill something, the waste material will push out, and this pushes it back in, makes for a cleaner hole, and packs it in there, I guess. And it's a small head, so it doesn't not too obvious, and uses a star or whatever you call that kind of bit. Here's a shot at just how flexible this board is. It's very different than working with 2x4s. This is only about an inch thick, but it's heavier than 2x4s. So since it flexes so much, it needs extra support. And you can see why I put the saw on the ground. But I still need some support for when this cuts through, that the weight of the board doesn't cause a raggedy edge at the very end. So I stuck my water bottle into there. Hopefully that'll be all right. To cut this stuff, I'm just using a 12-inch 60-tooth blade that came with the miter saw, and I'm very pleased with the quality of the cut it makes. You can tell by the tone of my voice just how pleased I am. Obviously this material has a grain pattern to make it resemble wood, and in order to make it flow best, you want to orient your board so that the grain is the same on the boards that are butting up against each other. So I cut these 1, 2, 3, 4 boards so they fit between the posts, and we are about 1% done now. And if you look over here, here's a super colossal mind-blowing hack. I wrapped the cord around the baluster so it doesn't kick loose. Now I'm going to pretty much cut everything out and lay it out before I put a single screw in. And I'm using these carpenter pencils for spacing these boards about 1/4 inch, like so. And it looks like I'm going to need a few more pencils. I ran out of pencils to use for spacers, so I got some of the crappiest lumber I could find from the rare and exotic particle board tree as shown here, and I'll then cut them to precise 3 inches. That's pretty close. And here's a shot of the spacers that I made a while ago. Get the boards evenly spaced, and we'll screw it together later. So I got the basically mahogany dark brown colored lumber, and you can see from the sawdust that it's not dark brown through and through. It's just more of a surface hard coating. We want our screw to go into the beefy part of the composite material, right there and right there. To make the job go a little faster, where you can't see where the exact center of these lines are, I made a little template from thin gauge metal that just snaps on right there, so you know right where they go. You could also use some like postcard material, poster stock, or whatever you have. Of course, you could also use a piece of scrap wood, scrap composite. I think this is just a little more convenient, a little more accurate. Now we're starting to make a little bit of momentum. You can see I have boards at each end as a spacer to keep them from jamming too much into the siding there. And you can see the spacers between the boards, and a bunch of extra spacers I made. And I've also made sure that the grain is going the same direction. And one thing you want to avoid is over here, I'll show you, is having a bunch of identical grains. It'll make it look like you've built a deck for mutant clone trees or something. Don't want that. Surprisingly enough, even though this is composite lumber with no grain in it, it actually has some warps in directions you wouldn't expect. See how the gap is right there? And if I correct that gap, then it occurs down here. But we'll pull that together when we put the screws in. While you guys weren't watching, I ran into an obstruction here, and no matter how hard you squeeze it, it just won't go in there. So I measured off, including the spacer, and then I'll cut out that piece on the jigsaw. Sawhorse to give us blade clearance, and here we go. Oops. Cut the wrong piece out. Still have the scrap. I think it'll line up just where you can barely notice it, so we can live with that. I found a couple of spots where my saw was not at a perfectly right angle and resulted in some of these gaps, so I'm going to just take that board out before it's screwed down and just clean it up real quick on this chop saw. And that's much better.